by Albert EXXKO. Thank you, Albert. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Evening, everyone. I'll try and not take too much of your time. I know everyone's very interested to look around at particularly Tony's stuff there. So I'm going to talk a little bit somewhat on the air. Probably not quite so much the QRP things I might normally mention, because I'm guessing you probably know a lot more QRP than I do. So we'll talk a bit about the program and some of the considerations that you might need to think about operating QRP, how it's different up at a mountain than in your shack at home. So, a little bit about it. Amateurs have obviously been operating from quiet areas and hilltops for quite a long time. But the Summits on the Air program is a fairly recent edition, only started in 2002 as an award program by John Linford and Richard Hughes in the UK. So Richard is still behind the SOTA Beams company, so he may seem familiar to some of you. Now, it's grown a lot in those initial few activators, nearly 25,000 registered users, nearly 10,000 activators, so the people who go up on the mountains and operate stations, 197 associations, and nearly 170,000 summits within those, 7 million QSOs on the website logged, and 40,000 activated summits. So, if you look around Northern Ireland, around the British Isles, certainly most of those summits you can get to easily. If you look like somewhere in the Alps, okay, they're just inaccessible mountains and ones that you quite simply can't activate. So we've got a lot lower number of the activated ones. There are still a couple, I think, I'm not sure in Northern Ireland, certainly down the Republic, that haven't been activated. So yeah, there's an opportunity there to go somewhere new if you want. The Irish Association for Gulf India, straight off the block 2002, Colin Williamson initiated that chapter. There's 65 summits there. John Smith looks after the Echo India end, started a year later, and yeah, we're just a bigger land area with more summits. Put a picture of Victor in there. Victor would have been here today, he's off of Friedrich, I think. It's well worth getting Victor to talk if you get an opportunity to listen to him. He's activated a lot of summits around Europe. I think he's activated in Canada as well. Purely for the stories alone, I think he had to get airlift off Summit once. So whatever about the radio, just the stories and the adventures is worth listening to Victor on. So what do we do? Well, first off, not all summits are SOTA summits that qualify this. It's not as simple as, you know, find the nearest hill. And this picture kind of illustrates it quite well. So these are fairly local. I'm not going to butcher the pronunciations. We'll start on the left-hand side there. So up near the top, or for those of you in the room, I mean that. There's a triangle there, Sugar Mike 002. That's the SOTA summit. But the two main summits that Google Maps thinks are the main hiking routes aren't actually SOTA summits. Similarly, down on the, I was going to say south, on the bottom of that slide, Sugar Mike 016 is a SOTA summit, but the one slightly further over, which Google Maps thinks is the main summit, isn't. And then similarly, if we look on the right-hand side, it's there we have what's fairly flat areas of Northern Ireland, and then there are valid SOTA hills in there. So we have these small little local hills that are SOTA summits and big mountains that aren't. Why? Well, Sir Hugo Munro, to go back a bit, created the Munro tables for mountaineering in Scotland back in 1891. And his goal was to classify all the peaks that were over 3,000 feet. This started the tradition of peak bagging. So once there's a list of something, people want to get them all. I guess Workdale Britain Square is a good example of that. Once there's something to collect, people will try. And that's great for mountaineering. Less useful for those of us who just want to go for a walk in the hills and bring a radio with us. So Alan Dawson, about 100 years later, compiled a list of summits that he described as having topographical prominence. So if you look at the landscape, what's the main summits that you see? And the way he defined this was it must be 150 meters, have this topographical prominence of 150 meters, regardless of absolute height. And those are the ones that count for SOTA, certainly in the British Isles. They're referred to as Marylands. Why are they Marylands? Yep, it's a pun. So just to explain that a little more, if we just take this as an example mountain range, the summit on the right obviously is the highest peak in the range. That qualifies for SOTA. The middle peak doesn't, because the valley between it and the biggest one doesn't have that 150 meters prominence. So it doesn't really look big in the landscape, if you think of it that way, compared to the summit. Whereas the one on the left, it's a bit more distinct, but it has a deeper valley, and it looks more of a distinct peak. So that's the rules of it. It seems odd, certainly when you look at a map and you think that mountain should be there. It can be a little frustrating even when you want to activate some summits and there's only one in the range. But it does give us the benefit that it's a very well-defined system. It's not like some of the other on-the-air programs where it can be debatable as to what's a castle, what's not, what's a park, what's not. We have this defined as a rule. Someone can measure it and decide if it's in or out. You don't need to worry about any of that. You just go to the sotamaps.org website, select the association you want to look at, choose the region, and it will show you the map and what summits are valid and how many points. But it's just, if you're wondering why another summit isn't on the list, it's because of the Marylands rule. So if you want to go and access, if you want to go and activate a summit, there's a few things to bear in mind. You must have a legitimate access route, no breaking into private mountains. That's actually an issue in a couple of places in Echo India. Particularly the smaller ones tend to be just parts of people's farms. No part of the station may be connected to a vehicle, so you can't just drive up and activate. The final method must be person powered, so if there is a car park at the top, it's fine, drive up, but take your equipment out and operate away from the car, particularly away from the power source. It does try to be environmentally conscious, so no fuel generators. Probably not something you need to say to a QRP audience, but it's in the rules. All the equipment must be carried. And to count for an activation, you only need 4 QSOs. I know some other programs are quite involved in what they require in verification. SOTA is very much based on trust. So once you've got 4 QSOs, we count. No one's going to check those. The other party to the QSO doesn't need to submit their result for it to count either. We trust you. There are a few things that we're not allowed to do. We don't count anything via a terrestrial repeater. If you want to go by satellite, that does count. And it's a valid activation. You just won't get the points for it once you make 1 QSO. So if you go up, talk to somebody, you can log that. You just won't get points for it. You can claim each summit once in a calendar year. You can activate it as many times as you like, but you'll only get the points once. And the activation area is within 25 meters vertically below the summit. You don't have to climb to the very top and have your antenna stuck on the trigger mast. Anywhere nearby is generally good enough. So as I was saying, the logs are based on trust. There's no need to have very detailed logs, evidence that you were up there. It's a trust system. So in terms of how to practically go and activate it, well, pick a summit. I think we've covered some of that. Choose your radio equipment. Choose your hiking equipment if it's appropriate. Go to the summit and set up. Spot yourself is key, and particularly if you're using very low power QRP, that's going to be a big bonus to you. And call CQ and upload your log when you get home. And you can stay overnight if you like. That's me camping up there after I think one of the county's contests for the RTS. So SOTA Maps has, as I said, that's where you go to see. The points you'll get for a summit depends pretty much on the height. Gulf India, 10 points for the highest above 800 meters and 1 pointer for the ones below 400 and the range in between. Slightly different in Echo India, I think it's 700 meters. You also get a winter bonus, so in the winter months, and that can vary what they mean, between associations you get 3 extra points. So if you activate something in summer and then go and do it in the snow again, there's another 3 points for you. Planning, it's sometimes not as simple as look at the map. OpenStreetMaps may have some extra paths. that won't be on Google Maps, may not be on the Ordnance Survey map. The Strava heat map is an interesting one. This is where people have GPS watches and they get uploaded to Strava with their routes. So you can see where people are actually walking, which sometimes can give you an interesting path that may not be on any maps. And also some US military installations, which the US government are rather upset about. So it's an interesting website to have a poke around on. SOTA Maps, sometimes you can upload a blog or a review, if you like, of your mountain, so that can say, oh, I found a good park here. And similarly, mountainviews.ie covers the whole island and has notes on parking and routes. Choose your radio equipment, right. You can operate with whatever you like, using whatever mode you like. It's completely up to you. I have brought a 450D up and sufficient batteries and operated 100 watts. It wasn't worth it, to be honest. It's probably a good thing to say to a QRP audience that I noticed no difference between doing that and taking an 817. It was not worth the hassle. Interesting experiment, but not worth it. But it must, you must be able to carry it up, and it must survive living in your backpack. So I know Tony has some very well constructed cases there for his boxes. If you just have a circuit board, that might not survive in your backpack getting up. You will need to bring power, obviously. Sometimes that simply is just bring your handheld that has a battery in it. You may need to think of external batteries. I'll talk about that in a minute. It can be as simple as just bring a handheld, particularly in Gulf India. Most summits seem to be activated on 2 meters. Less so around Dublin. It can be quite tricky sometimes around Echo India to get responses on 2 meters. Or bring a small rig up with you, something like the 817. So that's how small that is. I'm sure everyone here knows it and has an internal battery with it. I've put this 705 there in question marks because it on the specifications it looks a great radio, and I'm sure it's great to use on a nice fine day in a park somewhere. Would I want to be on top of the moorings in mist and rain trying to operate a touchscreen LCD? It might have issues with that. So they're the kind of things, depending on how you want to get into this, the kind of considerations to make on radios. I'll mention this, but I think it's been adequately covered by Les earlier on, of the benefits of using very low power kits. And there are some that are SSB. It's not all just CW. Normally, I would advise people probably not to start here. This audience, yeah, you know yourself, you're well capable of starting at this level. It is just to bear in mind that you are operating on a mountain, which is going to be different operating conditions than in your shack at home or on your test bench. So bear that in mind. And as I said earlier, all modes and bands are available. If you want to operate FT8, off you go. You just have to bring your laptop and your power supply with you, whether you want to or not. It's up to you. The power considerations, really for most single activations, the internal power that comes with radios that have internal batteries is fine, whether that's your handheld or the battery pack that comes in the 817s, 818s. They all will publish their specifications, so you can have a good estimate of how many hours you'll get out of them. If you need to take longer than that, if you're camping overnight, you will need to think about an external battery. The way to go there is with LiPo or LiFe batteries. They look a bit like this. Yeah, I think that's a 4-cell one. Word of warning for LiPo, they do need to be treated with a bit more care. They're not the same as the rechargeable batteries that go into commercial devices. If you don't believe me, Google LiPo explosion and have a look at the videos. They're very entertaining. Which you don't want to have happen. Well, on the mountain might be not too bad. You certainly don't want to have it at home. So these need to be charged properly and they need to be stored properly. Storage, generally not too much of a problem. The little fireproof bags just in case. The LiFe ones are not nearly as dangerous as the LiPo, the LiPos. But that's a good way to store it, so it doesn't, and it's just getting punctured in your rucksack, things like that. Just look after it. The charger then looks a bit more like this than the one you might normally slot your AA's, AAA's into. These have some special electronics, so notice there's not just the 2 wires coming out for your voltage, there's also this little control lead, which the charger can talk to and monitor the different levels of the different cells and ensure that it's charged properly for you. So yeah, if you want to go down that route, get a good charger also. Another thing worth mentioning for these, particularly for people doing home brew, is the voltage profile on them. So an LiFe cell is nominal. Well, since I have the graph, let's talk about LiPos. That's nominally 3.7 volts, and for most of its discharge profile, it's about 3.7 volts. But when it's straight out of the charger, that peaks up to 4.3. So depending on your electronics, that might be expecting a 12-volt input, and you could be actually giving it more like 16, 17. Be careful. Another good thing about these chargers is that they can also discharge, so you can take off, you can get them fully charged and then discharge a bit till you're down to that 3.7 kind of safe operating voltage for your own electronics. And then there are also these little alarms you can get that will actually send a very loud beep when you get, probably you want to set it towards the end of the curve there where it's just starting to dip down. Stop operating at that point. These batteries don't particularly like being run completely flat and then recharged. But that still will give you plenty of operating time. And we're doing on time here. 20 minutes, good. So the next thing, antennae. So for VHF, look, you can get away with, I don't know where I put my radio on here. Simple whip antenna. If you're operating anywhere near a town, particularly in Northern Ireland where 2 meters seems really popular, that's probably going to be fine. There's no shortage of homebrew options, whether it's with this, tape measure that recoils down, something with twin lead, a dipole with PVC. If you do want to go something like the commercial route, or want to copy something like the commercial route, that's the Arrow antenna from the States. It's designed for working satellites, so at 2 and 17 you can twist the polarity. But it packs down really well, all of these unscrew. It's called the Arrow antenna because these are actually made from arrow shafts. Packs down easily in the backpack and does give you good gain. So it's handy if you're in like contests or something, but not really necessary to be honest. But there are no shortage of designs of 2 meter antenna to play with and experiment with. On the HF end, I think Les mentioned a little bit about this. You need a big long wire. One end of it will be helpful to have on a support. So this is what the SOTA beams, or one of the SOTA beams products is. This extends up to 8 meters. Now it is very bendy at the end, so it does take a little bit of practice to get used to setting this up. But that can be used either to be the center of a dipole or at the end of an end-fed antenna. I use the link dipole most. I just find it convenient. It does have a couple of disadvantages. So this bit with the coil, that goes at the top of our mast. These are the 2 ends of the dipoles that spread out. The crocodile clips here are at the points for changing the band. So when they're all connected, that's 40 meters. It also does 30 meters and 20. So it's my good go-to 2040 antenna. But it does take a little bit of getting used to. Again, that's a commercial one from SOTA Beams. It's fairly easy to make your own as well. Disadvantage of that is if you want to change bands, you have to take the antenna down and mess with those crocodile clips. With an end fed, it's a lot easier. It's just change your tuner, or if you have it cut just right, you probably won't have much work to do. In terms of how that looks, that's myself and the little lad on Knockery in Sligo. On a nice calm day, as you can imagine, if this gets windy, this can collapse. So it does need a bit of practice. And the radio equipment, we've touched on it, but if you're using an end-fed, a tuner may be of use. There are kits where I was chatting about them earlier, and Les mentioned some. Commercially, there are auto tuners available if you want to go that route. In terms of Morse, I put some of the I don't think this particular one that I've in the photo is still available, but as I say, you can do quite brilliantly with the toothbrush and make the molar Morse key. Just has to connect 2 wires. That's perfectly good way to go. Headphones you will need, and to tell you now, no matter how good you think your loudspeaker on a radio is, just with the wind, bring headphones. And yeah, scratch that bit out for giving the audience. You can bring an amplifier up. This one is available that will do the job. But as I said, I've tried with amplifiers. I've tried bringing a rig that can do 100 watts up, and it's not worth carrying the extra weight and cables and hassle. It really isn't. You're operating in a very electrical noise-free environment, and you're operating, particularly if you're doing SOTA, you're dealing with chasers who are listening out for you. They're really making the effort to make the contact. So the extra power just really isn't worth it. Hiking equipment, so this is more of a word of safety. What's very nice at the car park at the bottom may not be what you meet at the top. That photo is from an overnight SOTA I did a couple of years ago. It was a lovely day, and I spent the entire time in that cloud. Temperatures drop radically as you go up. So if you're going to be going to hills that require you hiking through bogs and there's not a nice path to follow down, ensure you know what you're getting into. Camping may be allowed. It is anywhere in Wicklow Mountains National Park, for example. I'm not sure what the rules are here with the National Trust and that. It does let you operate at night, which brings a whole other dimension to things. QRP, SSB contacts to the States, no problem, from the top of a mountain. But yeah, you'll want batteries. So at the summit, I mentioned this idea that the 25-meter altitude you're allowed to operate within. That's a couple of things for it. It allows you to get away from the crowds, which is probably the main benefit. You don't want them tripping over your antenna wires, and you also may not want them coming up and talking to you quite so much. The people will come and ask what you're doing. That's fine. You don't necessarily want everybody who walks up to come over and talk to you when you're trying to do an activation. But the main thing is just try and find somewhere comfortable, find somewhere where you have the space, that it's going to be safe to operate without people falling over lines. Spot yourself on SOTA Watch. There is an app you can use on your phone for that, or you can set up an alert before you go, saying I'm expected to be there at this time. Call CQ SOTA. If you have spotted yourself on SOTA Watch, there will be people all around the world who will be listening. It is not uncommon to have a pile-up immediately. If it's your first time operating a pile-up, that can be a little intimidating, but everybody's pretty patient. They're used to doing this. You will find there'll be a couple of operators who will just shout their call sign no matter what. How you deal with it's up to you. Personally, I just work them and move on. But generally, you have a very friendly group of people who want to work you. They're interested in working you, and they're patient. And some of them, as Les's friend in Australia, with some very impressive stations to pick you out. You may need to call for a while, particularly if you haven't spotted, but also listen for summit-to-summit calls. If you're activating on a Saturday afternoon, say, I guarantee you there are other people around Snowdonia, the Lake District, Wicklow Mountains, who are going to be activating as well. Generally, they will give their call sign and say summit to summit. Listen out for that. Generally, everybody else will be quiet if you say summit to summit station, go ahead. You do there's an extra award system for contacting other summits. So that's the added incentive there. And you can also call those stations yourself. So you just say summit to summit. If you're having trouble, you can call on a repeater. The QSO won't count for the repeater, but you can certainly ask, okay, is there anyone local who can try simplex? That's got me out of a couple of problems, particularly in the west of Ireland, where someone did manage to be mobile and could get in range just for the fourth one. So that's perfectly fine to do. The awards then, so you can get for the highest mountains will be 10 points. The Mountain Goat Award is 1,000 activation points, so 100 10-point mountains. The Shack Sloth, there we go, got it eventually. 1,000 chaser points. Easier to get, certainly easier to get if you have a good home station. Bearing in mind that you are generally trying to work QRP stations, so if you're using compromised antennas at home, you may struggle more as a chaser than an activator. There are certificates in these nice glass trophies, which you can buy, I think. I don't think they're just posted out to you. And there are certificates for the kind of major milestones of points as well, keep it interesting. There are separate summit to summit ones. I think there's a separate microwave award. I've never looked at microwave, I'm aware that there's a separate award for it. So in terms of Golf India, what's it like? What do people do? Pretty much what you might expect. I was actually surprised at the amount of 2-meter activity here. It's not as high in Echo India. It's very much more 2040. But that just goes to show you can probably go to any summit here with a handheld and have a good chance of activating it. So SOTA here, how are people doing? Yeah. So I mentioned ONL was quite prolific. That's how prolific. 4,000 something points. There's a few other familiar call signs on here. You'll see people who have got the Mountain Goat or very close to, and the number of summits they've activated. MI7 ACD there, 22 summits. So, if you start this and you're doing, a summit every month or something, you get onto these leaderboards quite easily. There's a few very dedicated people, but a lot of people who just kind of go up once or twice a year. If they happen to be going hiking anyway, bring the radio with them. There's a very kind of wide level of interest in how SOTA is done. So some people take it very, very seriously, others not so much. So, I don't know these mountains, but from looking at the SOTA reflector and looking at the map, they may be suitable ones. Somebody might tell me these are terrible, but I'll mention them anyway. Sleeve Group is 4-point award. There's a car park near it, and you've less than 2k walk up to the summit from the car park. Now you do have transmitters at the summit, which seems to be a bigger problem in Northern Ireland than other places. That can cause a problem. If you're just using your little Baofeng near a big BBC transmitter, your signal may get out fine, people may not hear you. That's what I've found in Dublin. Using a slightly more reputable brand, shall we say, does seem to get over that problem. But if you're building your own QRP kits, you've designed your own filters, these may not be the best summits to activate on. You really want to get away from that RF interference. They have a similar problem with the transmitters, but it does have parking nearby, probably closer to a main population centre and a 3k walk up to the summit. So you'd be at the summit well within an hour, taking it extremely easily. And that one does seem very popular on 2 meters. So if you fancy a Saturday afternoon walk with your handheld, that might be a good one. At the other end of the spectrum, Slieve Donard, it's a popular walk. It is a good climb up. But it's a well-marked path by all accounts up from Newcastle. Easily activated on 2 meters, has a lot of HF activation as well. But it is a popular one. But you're not likely to get lost. You're not going to have problems getting up to it. So that's why, although it's 10 points, it mightn't be a bad one to start if you actually like going up the hills. So some last words then from me. Half hour, good. Enjoy the experience. We have some really beautiful hills that are well worth visiting in their own right. Do just get out there. There are hills for all abilities, take them as slow as you want to in your own pace. People will come and ask you what you're doing. You're operating your radio in public. This happens. You can use that 25-meter activation zone to get away from them, but someone sees an 8-meter mast and wires coming off it. And particularly, I put a flag at the top of mine, so they're going to come over. Be nice to them. It's a chance to have an outreach conversation, evangelize amateur radio. If you're not in a contest, it's probably not too bad to talk to them. If you are, it can be problematic. I've had all sorts of people come up to me, the park ranger, generally just asking what I'm doing, not telling me to stop. A lot of that depending on where you are. If you're operating, for example, Tony, beside the American ambassador's residence in Dublin, you may get a different response. Army youth clubs, walkers, lots of people just wanting to know what amateur radio is, being thoroughly amazed that you're having a conversation with someone in Italy. It's quite a lot of Italians. So you can take that opportunity to explain to them. I got fed up explaining things, so I put together a little leaflet. So you can just give them briefly kind of an explanation of what you're doing, hand them something as go read up more if you want. And lastly, there is a SOTA Ireland group on Facebook, which is fairly active for the whole island. We'll post generally if someone's going up a hill, they'll post their, I'll say reviews, but photos and where they found good access or any problems they had. It's a nice friendly community there, so feel free to join. And lastly, then give you a few URLs. So the main site, sota.org.uk. There's a reflector there as well for discussion board for those of you who want to kind of chat about it more, ask more specific questions. SOTA Maps is the go-to site for just seeing what's a valid summit to activate. SOTA Data, all of these are linked from the first one, but just things have kind of gone well, the first four are anyway. SOTAdata.org.uk is where you upload your logs. Generally, you'll log in a paper format. Sometimes it might be convenient to log on your phone. Just put it into your logging form tool of choice at home, export a diff format and upload it. As I said, we'll trust you activated it. No one's going to check the logs. There's no validation that the QSOs happen. The other party doesn't need to log, things like that. SOTA Watch for spotting, both for spotting yourself and for checking who's active. I put Peter Parker. I could have chosen a wide range of QRP resources. Others I've shown some. Personally, I found Peter Parker's website and his YouTube videos and his books very interesting. It takes a very nice experimental approach of he will upload videos of the things that don't work so well, which is also quite interesting, as well as here's how to make the ideal antenna. So yeah, if you want to cover balloons in tin foil and try and hang them out of trees, yeah, it doesn't work as well as you might. It works exactly as well as you think. Let me put it that way. But he tries these things, so it's interesting to see what you can do. SOTA Ireland on Facebook, and there is a SOTA Spotter Android app which ties into SOTA Watch for when you're up on the hills as well. And that's all I've got. Thank you very much for listening.